Eugene Mulero with Transport Topics, and joining us today is Zach Schafer, Executive Director of Infrastructure Week. Zach, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Eugene, and it's been great working with you on Infrastructure Week over the last several years.
Terrific. Let's tell people when is Infrastructure Week this year and a little bit about it. What is it?
So Infrastructure Week this year is May 15th to 19th. This is the 5th annual Infrastructure Week, and Infrastructure Week grew out of, accidentally, one might say organically, out of a void in having a platform and a space and a time where organizations, businesses, labor unions, groups across both the traditional infrastructure stakeholders and the less usual suspects. So those organizations, sectors, companies who don't work specifically in the infrastructure industry but have a strong stake in its future, in its smooth operation, and in making sure that it's fully funded. So we created with our steering committee, which is a collection of some organizations you probably know of, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the AFL-CIO, Business Roundtable, Brookings, the National Association of Manufacturers, the American Society of Civil Engineers, et cetera, to build this platform and to bring people, not just in Washington, but all around the country together around this core message that infrastructure matters to all Americans, to our economic competitiveness, to our health and safety, to our jobs, to our long-term future as a nation, and that we need to, as a collective voice, make sure that our policymakers at the national level are aware that there is this broad, diverse constituency that wants to see action on infrastructure investment, yes, but also many other issues in the infrastructure area, technology, procurement, some of the most and least sexy issues in infrastructure.
What is one way that infrastructure, the status, the state, the conditions of infrastructure impacts the local business, a local driver, commercial truckers?
Sure.
What is the local and regional impact?
Sure. Well, it's a great question because this is really about people. It's about small businesses, big businesses, the workers who work for them, the families that are driving to school or going on their summer vacations. And this really impacts them in a real way. That the average commuter, I think the latest from the Texas Transportation Institute spends $960 a year on gas wasted idling in traffic. Yeah. That in the Washington, D.C. metro area, we spend 80 hours a year sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
That
I-66 is always congested.
LA, you name the metropolitan area, there's trouble. Not just in metropolitan areas. You look at the bottlenecks at our freight ports of entry, whether it's airports, seaports, land ports of entry. These freight bottlenecks are causing breakdowns in the supply chain that manufacturers have to deal with. That affects how many workers they can hire, where they can build their plants. That affects the communities that build up around them. And at a very local level, I mean, we've heard stories over the last several years about water infrastructure and poor water quality because of a number of issues. Having boil advisories in cities in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in New York, places around the country that families can't shower, they can't drink their water, they don't have the local businesses like coffee shops, bars, restaurants have to shut down. You see closed signs, and that closed sign is because of crumbling infrastructure. So this really is a real issue that affects real Americans. And there is also even a national security component to this, that if we're going to respond to the natural disasters and even potential active threats to our nation, infrastructure is how our first responders get there. They're also frequently the target points. So there has to be a lot of attention paid to how we think about infrastructure as a national security asset. There's a lot of ways that.
How do you, how are you reacting to all the chatter that you're hearing from, the administration, the president himself, members of Congress? Mm-hmm. The first hearing at the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee was about infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Is that reassuring? Give me your thoughts on that.
It is reassuring. It is. When's the last time that we had leadership in the Senate, in the House, and in the White House all talking about infrastructure as a national priority? We know that there are other priorities on the agenda that Congress wants to work on in the next, in the immediate future. Healthcare, tax reform, immigration. But this remains a key issue, and I think that especially coming up through the through the CR and the debt ceiling discussion that we'll have come the end of March. On the other end of that, we're going to need, and Congress is going to need to find that unifying issue that sort of gets them back working on, working on issues that the American people are interested in hearing about when they get back to their districts in August. And infrastructure is something that their constituents care about. That's become ever more clear in the last, not just the last election cycle, but in several cycles previously. So I think we're going to see, Senate leadership, the Senate Democrats put out one proposal of one mix of options to get to $1 trillion. We'll see another proposal coming out of the administration at some point. We'll also see reactions to that and alternative proposals from not just from Republicans in the House and Senate, but from the other public sector and private sector organizations. There's going to be a lot of folks who all want to make sure that their agenda is part of this package. But the key takeaway I have is that this is not just a small targeted pothole repair initiative. This is a re-examination of what should America's infrastructure be? What types of infrastructure should we be investing in? How should it be funded? How can we build an infrastructure system that reflects 21st century needs, 21st century challenges? And then how do we go about building that? And that's a really exciting conversation to be having.
Well, there is consensus among local leaders and elected officials on the need for improving and modernizing infrastructure. You touched on that the funding question is always the one that gets sticky.
Yep.
And we've seen states have some momentum to raise the gas tax. Indiana is looking into it, Tennessee, Mississippi, there are others. And last year, my home state of New Jersey did the impossible and they raised the gas tax.
23 cents, I think.
Exactly, yeah. So how do you've been leading the way with Infrastructure Week, but at the same time, you hear from the states that they can't wait for Washington and that's why they're moving on this.
Sure.
Is there an anticipation that Congress will answer the call of stakeholders and local leaders?
I think there is. I mean, states and cities and county leaders all across the country are doing a lot. I mean, that's become very clear. That whether it's state gas taxes, I think 9 more states implemented an increased gas tax on January 1st of this year.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, including Vice President Pence's home state of Indiana. This is not just a blue state trend. This is across the country, and you're not seeing governors and state legislators losing their seats over this. This is something that their constituents understand is valuable. Beyond that, you're also seeing ballot initiatives targeting other forms of revenue at the state and local level. On November 8th, 2016, $200 billion worth of ballot initiatives were approved directly by voters,
right.
which includes some enormous investments in LA Metro and Seattle Public Transit. So that's a good sign that people are willing to pay more. And there's a lesson to take away from that, but I don't want to take away the wrong lesson. The lesson is not that states and cities are going to be able to do this on their own. The lesson is that they're doing it out of desperation, that these are things that have to be done, and they're doing what they can where they can, but they need a strong federal partner, and that this has traditionally been an area of pretty strong bipartisan agreement at the federal level. And I think there are ways to break the logjam on that. I'm hopeful, given the signals I see coming out of what folks in the Senate and the House are saying, and what many members in the Senate and the House are also not saying. There's, there could be a lot more active opposition to this. Obviously, the devil's always in the details. It's in the pay-fors or the revenue streams. But there is, and what I think is one of the key successes of Infrastructure Week and many other initiatives that have grown up around it, is that the consumers are coming to the table, and there's a broad, diverse coalition of individuals, businesses, labor groups, and other organizations in this space who are all making the case that this is no longer one particular issue on the docket. This is the broad core competitiveness issue facing America.
Infrastructure Week, for the full schedule and lists of keynote speakers coming up, where can they go check it out?
So infrastructureweek.org is our website and clearinghouse for all of that information. You can go there to learn how to participate. We've got a lot of tools and resources to help organizations start planning. We'll launch our calendar of events probably in the beginning of March. But one of the things that I'd love for Transport Topics readers and viewers to take away is that this isn't something isolated to DC. This was never meant to be a DC echo chamber. This is an opportunity for businesses, local chambers of commerce, local labor groups, contractors all around the country to do something wherever they are, to stand up and talk about, our theme this year is #TimeToBuild. So what is it time to build in your industry, in your community? What are the priorities that are important to you? What are the challenges that you face? And you can go to our website and learn how to participate, how to get other local stakeholders in your community involved, plan an event, get involved online. There's a lot of ways to participate that are some untraditional and traditional. So we really encourage your listeners have a more vested stake in this than just about anybody. So we need their participation.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, Infrastructure Week in May 15th through the 19th. And Zach, thank you for joining us. And check out Capital Agenda every Tuesday when Congress is in session at ttnews.com.